Hey, I'm Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle real estate market update for January 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. Excited to be back in the office, back here filming another one of these market updates. Took a little bit of time off hanging out with the kids during their Christmas and New Year's break, and they're back in school now. So excited to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the housing market. We've seen, I think, what we've been talking about in the last couple months play out in the Seattle housing market. And a little sneak peek, we are at this point down into those inventory levels right around a month where things might be really getting competitive to start 2025. So without further ado, let's jump into the client story part of our update. And the purpose of this story or these stories is to give a little bit of a picture of what happened during the fall heading into the winter here in the housing market. I had a couple different listings where we priced a little on the higher side, and those listings, one in Kenmore and one in Edmonds, ended up taking a little bit longer to sell, which is normal for the fall. But also if you're priced higher, you're going to add to those days. And they also sold for less than asking price with some negotiating that was baked into that. Some of them, actually both of them, had price reductions as well. And part of that is there's just more to choose from in the fall, something we were talking about. Another part of that is just being a little bit priced above the market value. And that's something, as a real estate professional, I always give advice and we talk through the different options, but I never force a specific list price. I always give that option. So we talk about different pricing options and strategies and how that plays out with the sale. And to contrast that, I had a client that was purchasing a house in Shoreline, and this particular house was priced on the low side of the value and had multiple offers. My client purchased the house, but ended up paying over the asking price. And this is all in the same time window. And part of that is location. The other part of it is pricing. And I think when a house has been sitting on the market for a little while, I found it's either because the price is a little high or there's something different about the house, maybe something wrong with the house. In this case, and in these cases, the price was the main key, but there are also some things about the house that you couldn't change. The Edmonds house was a little bit small. The Kenmore house had some updating, namely a septic system where the new owner would at some point be connecting to the sewer. So a couple problems that were harder to overcome. The Shoreline house was kind of the perfect mix of everything, which is typically the type of house that gets multiple offers. So if you're a buyer and you are purchasing, something to be looking for is, are there houses where maybe other buyers are overlooking them and I can make improvements or change the things that are causing people to not buy it? Or is this house going to always be this way and there's no way for me to make improvements to offset the deficiencies or the things that make people not want to buy it? Aside from cosmetic updates like the Shoreline house, this house was a house where it needed some cosmetic updates and it was going to be great. There wasn't anything else that needed to be changed about the house, which makes more people attracted to it, typically more competitive for buyers. But as a seller in the future, it's also easier to sell a house like that because all the buyers are going to be interested. Let's talk about rates here and transition towards the data now. The mortgage rates were, as of yesterday, 7.1%, according to Mortgage News Daily's survey. Today, 7.17% on the same index. Rates have been trending up in recent days into the low sevens. I'm not confident. Some are predicting that rates are still going to come down a little bit by the end of the year. I'm not super confident given what we've been seeing over the past few months. I think the conversations from the Fed, I think the health of the economy seems to be doing okay. And at that point, I don't see why they would be dropping rates. Now, there has been conversation around how rates are going to come down. I'm still waiting to see how that's going to happen, what's going to cause that. I hope it's not more easing, but that may be the route at some point. But I think personally here that the housing market has been doing well enough with the rates where they're at that they probably will be in this range for at least another little bit. I think earlier in the fall, I was more hopeful that we'd see rates coming down. I think as we've been seeing things play out with the new president-elect and the closing of the current administration, I'm not as confident that we're going to see a quick drop in the mortgage rates in 2025, but we'll see, right? I'm no prophet, but just kind of my feel is it will be in this for a little bit longer than maybe some were thinking, and I was even thinking earlier in the fall. Now, let's transition to the median sales price. Every month we're looking at year over year data, but at this point we're looking at the end of 2023 versus the end of 2024. So we wrapped up the median sales price at $875 in Seattle last month. That's 2.9% up year over year. Not a huge jump, right? Kind of keeping up with inflation, so to speak. And then Bellevue was up 4.3% at $1,825,000. Throughout the year, we had some bumps in a general uptrend, but not super big year over year gains. Days on market, median days on market last month, 26 in Seattle, 16 in Bellevue. There have been some listings that were sitting and have been selling. I think we'll start to see that reversing starting in January. Some of those listings that had been on for a while have sold. Average days even higher, right? So there's a huge delta here. And we got 41 in Seattle, 49 days on market for the average in Bellevue. And again, there have been some houses that have been sitting and sitting and sitting, and those have sold going into the new year. All of these numbers, and then factoring in some of the others like closed sales and the new listings, is all leading to what we've been talking about all fall. And that is that the supply of houses is dwindling. We have 1.2 months of supply in Seattle and 0.6 months of supply in Bellevue. That means if there aren't any new listings, or there are few, which is pretty typical in January, we're going to see super low. We're going to run out of listings in 1.2 months, 0.6 months. But what will happen is these numbers, my guess, at the end of January are going to be even smaller. Bellevue's maybe not much, but Seattle's, I would guess, would be similar to where Bellevue's at, which creates a typically really competitive market. And we're heading into the spring, right? We're heading into the peak time of the year, and we're going to have low inventory at that as we're starting out the new year. Now, let's take a quick peek at the listings, because when we're looking at the percent of list price, this is always fascinating, right? I talked about how we were going to see discounts in the fall, late fall, early winter, and that has proved to be true across the board. The average percent of list price, this is a deceiving number in some ways if it's not balanced with another number, and that is the average percent of the original list price. Now, if we look at percent of list price, we're seeing 99.3 in Seattle and 99.5 in Bellevue, right? Sounds great for sellers. But if we look at the median percent of the original list price, and this isn't factoring in any houses that had maybe a cancel and relist, this is the original list price, the most recent one. So there are sometimes multiple listings. If somebody lists a house, drops it more than 5%, they can cancel it and relist it as a new listing. And in that case, it would be, this data would be taking that number, not the previous one. So I think these discounts are even bigger than they're being reported. But in Seattle, 97.8% on average, and in Bellevue, 96.8% on average of the original price. So again, that would be factoring in a price reduction and a maybe a below asking price offer, but it's not factoring in if there was a previous listing that was substantially higher that was canceled, and then a new listing was put on. So let's just say, let's round down, maybe 95%. People were getting about a 5% discount on their purchases in the fall. It's probably fair to say. So congrats to anybody who bought a house before the inventory shrunk again here pretty dramatically. But just looking at the sales, the closed sales outnumbered the new listings in Seattle and in Bellevue, which is why we're seeing those numbers shrinking. And it's pretty normal, again, to see that. There's nothing outside of what I would have expected and what anybody should expect to see in the fall, early winter. But now we're heading into the new year. We're going to see some more listings coming on the market. I've got a few coming on here in the next couple weeks, and I think there's going to be other agents in that same boat. They haven't started to hit yet, as I'm looking at some of my market watch stats that I talk about on the weeks where we're not doing these updates. Not a lot of new listings over the past week, 252, significantly lower in King and Snohomish County than in the hotter months. Not too much of a difference from the other weeks outside of the week of Christmas. So we haven't quite seen that uptick in listings yet, but we will here soon as we start to near the spring. If you have questions, though, about your situation buying or selling real estate here in the Seattle area, I'd love to be a resource for you. I make these updates for people like you who are looking for information about what's going on in the housing market, and I'd love to help apply it to your situation. Feel free to also subscribe to this channel if you want to see more updates like this on a regular basis, or follow along with the weekly podcast, the Seattle Housing Market Watch.